Think about that little girl in Somalia. Think of what Jefferson said on another occasion about how only by one vote, because one man was sick, the Northwestern Ordinance on the abolition of slavery didn't pass. He said one man was sick and missed the vote, and it went the wrong way, and he said, and heaven was silent. Heaven was silent in that awful moment. Well, now just you transfer yourself to Somalia last week. Girl of 13, probably out for the first time unsupervised in her life. Things must have been very bad if she was allowed out without male supervision to begin with, but there's enough chaos to explain that. She's immediately pounced upon by a group of older men and very thoroughly raped and sodomized and beaten. And she goes to the religious court for redress. And the religious court knows its business, and it knows its texts very well. And it says, we don't know that it's true that what you say, that men abused you in this manner, but we can tell you've had sex. In fact, judging by your injuries, we can tell you've had a great deal of sex lately. But you're not married. So you're guilty of adultery. So now, before your wounds have stopped hurting, you're going to be buried up to your waist in hot sand, and laughing men will now take part in the only other cultural activity that gratifies the male sex in that part of the world, which is stoning a young woman to death. The people who did this knew exactly what they were doing, and they were in perfect conformity with their holy books, and they absolutely do not believe that anything happens randomly. They are not under the illusion that heaven is indifferent. They're not under the illusion that we are biologically created, that we're here because of the laws of natural selection and random mutation. They don't believe anything of the sort. They're utterly consoled by the idea that heaven intervenes and cares about every action. Otherwise, they wouldn't put themselves to the trouble of raping, torturing, and murdering a 13-year-old whose last moments you might want to take just a few seconds to imagine. It is not true, as is sometimes suggested by the people who've misread the brothers Karamazov and the speech by Smerdyakov in that great book, who says that if there's no God, then anything is possible. To the contrary, make the assumption that there is a celestial totalitarian dictator, and then absolutely any crime and cruelty is not just thinkable, but maybe required of you. Is the suicide bombing community, I invite you to ask yourselves, comrades, brothers, sisters, ladies and gentlemen, is it a secular community? Is the genital mutilation community a secular community? I don't think you'll find that it is. What are the historic justifications of slavery and genocide? There was slavery and genocide before monotheism, but monotheism codified and said that it was acceptable to do and carry out these appalling atrocities. You may be an atheist. One may be an atheist and be a nihilist. One may be an atheist and be a sadist. One may be an atheist and be a moral relativist or a fascist. Very unlikely the last one, I mean. Most fascists were very devout Christians, but it's almost mandatory if you're a Stalinist to be an atheist. It's not a position on its own, but it avoids the absolutely critical cruelty, which is that says that we owe a duty as original sinners to someone who created us ill, created us sick, and then ordered us on pain of torture and death to cure ourselves. And in the meantime mandated every kind of violence against womanhood, contempt for womanhood, cruelty against our fellow creatures, superstitious and crazed belief that it's possible to imagine. So I think that in the struggle for emancipation, which is where I began, and the one in which Mr. Jefferson, with half his heart and half his head, was able to take part, the very first cruelty and shackle to throw off is the man-forged manacle that is religion. Thank you.